Everybody quiet. Here we go.
91.1 WEGL FM, Auburn University.
Welcome back, everyone, in War Eagle. My name is Eddie Orantes, and I'm the Director of Business Operations for the Office of Alumni Affairs at Auburn University. And for the next 30 minutes, your host of 18 minutes and 56 seconds, the Auburn Alumni Association Speaker Series. This is our first on-location show. We are at WEGL on the student-run radio station at Auburn University. To see all of our shows, you can go to aub.ie/1856 series. We want to keep this fast-moving, so all our guests will talk or present or do whatever they do for no more than 18 minutes and 56 seconds. And we want to hear from you, so ask questions, interact by leaving comments on our Facebook page, and we'll do our best to answer them in the half hour that we have together. Todd Deary will be our today's co-host. He is the Assistant Director of Communications and Marketing in the Office of Alumni Affairs. He is Managing Editor of Auburn Magazine and wrote the cover story on WEGL's 50th anniversary that appears in the spring 2021 issue. He is also a WEGL DJ, co-hosting a show on Sunday nights called The Generation Gap. Now today, Todd will be talking to WEGL's current station advisor, Britt Bowen, class of 13, outgoing station manager, Breland McHenry, class of 21, and Dave Gamble, class of 74, WEGL alumni affiliate president and the first DJ to go on air. Without further ado, Todd, take it away.
Thanks, Eddie. I really appreciate it. It's really great to be in the studio here celebrating the 50th anniversary of WEGL going on the air. On April 25th, 1971, one of our guests, Dave Gamble, got onto the mic and celebrated what ended up being a really long journey to going onto the air. So we're really looking forward to talking about the founding of the station and, of course, what it's doing now and where it's hoping to go in the future. I guess I want to start with a question to all three of you, if we could, and thank all three of you for being here, of course. But I really want to start about, I guess I'll start maybe Britt with you and then to Breland, and then let's end with Dave. And I want to ask you, tell us about how you got to Auburn and when you first heard about WEGL.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I really had to think back and think about how that process happened. Is something, Todd, to be honest, I just haven't thought about. I don't know ever. And for me, I transferred to Auburn my junior year. I went to community college the first 2 years of college, so I was looking for a way as a junior to get plugged in. And I learned about WEGL through SOS, the transfer orientation. And for there, it's interesting, I actually did not join for the first year. Primarily because I was a student manager with the Auburn baseball team, but year two is when I realized I had a passion for sports broadcasting. I was interested in that, and I remember I walked in. I still remember the shirt that I wore when I came in. I saw the director at the time in Daphne Green, and I said, hey, I was just as green as could be, and just said, hey, pretty much just begged for a spot to come in and join WEGL. I had no idea that I already had a spot because, well, they're receiving student activity fees, and it's for all Auburn University students. So I knew absolutely nothing other than that they did sports broadcasting. I wanted to be a part of that, and all these years later, here we are.
So you just came in with the idea that you wanted to do something, you weren't even really sure what it was.
I came in knowing I wanted to do play-by-play and color commentary for Auburn soccer and Auburn softball. In regards to a radio board, an automation system, I knew nothing about how to run any of the equipment. I knew that you wore a headset while doing it, and I knew a little something about those sports. That's about all I had coming into WEGL, but I'm forever grateful for the opportunity I was provided.
Well, that's great. It seems like everybody that I talk to has a little bit of a different path. Breland, I wonder about you. Tell us how you got to Auburn. Like, I'm curious whether you had any broadcasting or radio experience beforehand, and then how you got involved. What was the first time you heard about WEGL?
I absolutely had no broadcast experience coming in to WEGL or to Auburn. So I chose Auburn because I'm from the state of Alabama, and as everyone knows, you either go to Auburn or Alabama, and I obviously chose the better choice. And at Camp WEGL, my freshman summer going into freshman year, I signed up for the email list for WEGL, which I saw was set up in the Haley Center where all of the clubs and organizations were set up. And I love music, and I thought it would be something to get involved in that I could do different, and I signed up for that, and the rest is history. My first show, Bret was there. Actually, I had my show at 7 a.m. on Wednesday mornings out of fear that people would listen to me. I purposely put it in the morning so no one would hear me.
You purposely crafted a show to get the smallest audience possible.
Yes, I did. I lived in the quad, and I would walk over about 5 minutes before and set up. But yes, I've loved WEGL. It's been the best experience ever.
I think it was you, Breland, before we move on, that didn't you completely script out and write like every single thing you were going to say?
Yes, I did.
So
I would type it up on a Word document, and Bret would sit there with me and he wouldn't say anything, no judgment. He just led me through it all, and it was very scripted. Yes, it was.
I'm sure you sounded loose as possible on the air. That's a great story. There's so many DJs that do the same thing and have similar stories. So Dave, how about you? Did you have radio experience when you came to Auburn, and then when did you first, it probably wasn't even called WEGL maybe when you first heard about it, so tell us kind of how you first got connected to the station.
Well, there was never any doubt in my mind that I was coming to Auburn. So from high school on, it was Auburn. I had scores sent to other schools, but I did have radio experience in my hometown of Selma. Worked at one of the local radio stations there. I started just before my 10th grade and worked 3 years in high school, and I also had an NROTC scholarship when I came to Auburn. So I came to Auburn intending not to work in radio. But it didn't take much talking to folks in the dorm and on campus. Well, they're having a meeting here in October or November, whenever it was. Why don't you just go talk to them? So I attended the meeting in the fall of 1970, and
what were your expectations going in? I mean, did the station have I'm trying to remember the chronology. Did it have a name at that point, or was it just a?
I think they were still working with a construction permit, had not actually requested the call letters. That was done, I believe, towards the end of the fall of 1970 or early part of winter quarter that we were on. But you're right, we did not have a call sign at that time. We did in early 1971.
Now, it's curious because before that, the idea for WEGL, and when you're attending that first organizational meeting where it's really kind of taking place, but the idea for WEGL had been, of course, really boiling for about 6 or 7 years at Auburn. I know in '64 they did a survey of the students, and I think 95 or 6% of the students had said they wanted a station. And I believe in '65 they had even raised the student activity fee $1 to help fund it. So were you all aware of that kind of, and even beyond that, there was even surveys done in late '68 and '69 even that had shown great interest. So were you all aware of that kind of groundswell?
I was not as a student, as a freshman in 1970, and even when we came on the air in 1971, I was not aware of that, but I've just really enjoyed going back and reading the history and talking to people like Chris Youts, who was a mover and shaker with the Student Government Association, and largely responsible for getting it approved by the Board of Trustees.
So let's talk about Chris, because I think Chris was he at that initial meeting that I'm sure he was, that initial meeting that you attended?
I believe Chris was there, and he will tell anybody that asked that he was not slightly interested in being a DJ, but out of that meeting, and I hear different numbers, several dozen people there, he was not interested in talking to DJs, people that wanted to be DJs. He was looking for leadership for the station. He wanted to get the station off on the right track, and they selected a group of temporary personnel to take on these positions: station manager, program director, engineer, and news director.
And what was your sense? So I think Chris is a really important figure. My sense of when talking to Chris is that Chris understood the politics of it. Is that safe to say?
That's a good word. That encompasses a lot. Chris was on the Student Government Association and was later elected treasurer, and that was probably one of the key facets of Chris's repertoire of talents, to know the funding, how to get the funding for the radio station, because it had to have a budget, and it had to have a substantial budget to buy the equipment to keep the operations going, and we actually paid, I believe, at the time about 5 or 6 positions.
Oh, okay, yeah. I know some of the things that Chris did was he sent letters. He sent letters to other stations that existed. Auburn was one of the largest universities at that time not to have a college radio station, and I know he had sent some letters to like Samford University and a few other places.
WREK,
Right.
WVSU, Samford. He did talk with those and got a lot of good information, which helped him put together what he needed to get everything approved by the Board of Trustees.
One of the things that really strikes me as amazing about the beginning formation is President Philpott at the time was a little skeptical about the station. He had delayed over the years, I think, kind of voting on it and really getting it through. And one of the last things they did was they formed this last committee that Chris was a part of. And so do you remember the makeup of that committee or him talking about that?
I remember the makeup, and also reading back in the Plainsman, there was a War Eagle girl or a former Miss Auburn. There was a football player, Dean Foy. I think Dean Foy was on every committee. And there were a couple of others. Elmer Salter, who was owner, I guess, of WAUD here in Auburn, and they thought that might have been a ringer to have a local commercial guy as part of that committee to make a determination and recommendation to Dr. Philpott. So the committee met. They did a lot of things over a couple of months and finally recommended 4-3 to Dr. Philpott to approve the station.
Yeah, I remember Chris thinking that the fix was in when he saw who was on that committee, but it turns out that they ended up, like you said, narrowly approving. And then amazing, one vote, right? One vote is the reason why we're all sitting here really in this space, at least the way that it exists now. Let's talk about, if I think we can pull up, hopefully we can pull up a photo here. I want to pull up a photo of the first day that you go on the air. You're in fact the first DJ that's on the air, and I'm going to step back a little bit. And so everybody is seeing this overhead view. Tell us what's happening in this picture, and then kind of tell us the event that's going on, because this is at the opening reception, as I recall, correct?
That's correct. This is actually on April 25th, 1971, probably right around 1 o'clock, give or take. Jimmy Carter, who was our program director, had signed on at noon that day, and I took over after him so he could talk to some of the folks there in the area. But Jimmy had done his shift, and this is basically a swap over here. I walked in, and something was playing on the turntable, so I had to make my selection. So I picked out one of the 45s and just started my format rotation. And queued it up on the board, and back then with the vinyl, you had to cue it up and make sure when you punched the button, it started out right at the beginning of the song. And you can see my left hand on the carts. Those were endless tape cartridges, much like the 8-track, but much higher quality. That had the jingles, our public service announcements on that. So I'm ready. It looks like to hit the jingle because my right hand's on the volume control for it. And as soon as that jingle is over, I punch the button for the record and maybe say I'm Dave Gamble or something like that.
I imagine you said something along those lines, yeah, for sure. So that was obviously a big day, and sort of, and so a couple of things. That was in 1239 Haley Center, which was the original location, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we're in the Harold Milton Student Center now, and then Bret, as I recall, we've had one other location in between those two?
Yeah, it was in Foy Hall. I don't remember the exact room location, but it was in Foy, I think, somewhere in the 80s into the early 2000s when the Student Center opened. Maybe it was late 80s. I think late 80s, 89 or 90. I'm trying to remember exactly, but somewhere in there, right? And I know several of the DJs that I've talked to, that was their experience was in that station. Funny story, when I first went looking for WEGL back in 2012, Foy was the first location that I went to because when I looked up the location online, it still had Foy Hall listed as the radio station location. I'm wandering around Foy for like 15 minutes saying, where is this station? And then finally I get redirected to somehow the Student Center. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's pretty great. Well, at least you didn't even wrote on Haley Center. I think one more thing before we talk about a couple of early events with the station that I do want to mention that was really fortuitous, I think, for you guys to get the station underway was that there was a station already built in Haley Center
and it was not a non-working sort of educational radio. So can you speak to the space a little bit?
The general layout of the organization?
Well, just in the fact that we had a non-working radio station that had already been, now people have to remember Haley Center had just been completed. It was basically just coming online, so everybody who comes to Auburn's like, Haley Center's this old decrepit building. Well, at the time, it was like brand new.
Absolutely. We had a wonderful setup. We had a large lobby, and that's where I'm looking. If you go back to the picture, I'm looking out into the large lobby.
Right.
So the brand new control board, brand new RCA mic, turntables. And so that was the main studio. There was a manager's office just off to my left behind the carts, again, in the picture. We had a large newsroom. We had a UPI news machine that fed the news.
Mm-hmm.
That was another win from Chris Yautz. He had to fight people that wanted to read the newspaper versus actually having a teletype. And so we had the news feed. We had a large room for the program director, and when I left, it was just filled, wall to wall, ceiling to floor, with albums and records. We just couldn't get enough, or they couldn't send us enough. We had a space for the engineer's office. We also had a dedicated newsroom, which was rather small, and we had a production studio, and we had a small interview studio between production and the main studio. So it was first class as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, no doubt. And I remember Chris mentioning he just couldn't believe we had a radio station that broadcast to nobody. Why can't we make it where we actually broadcast out on the air? Well, that's amazing. What I want to do is talk about a couple of early stories that I know the minute I began researching this piece, I got told, and I think they're worth retelling here for people who don't know about it. So one of them, and I believe we have photos of, is a time in which Muhammad Ali made a visit, and what happened when he came to town. So I guess I'll tee it up, and then Dave, if you have any additional information. But my understanding is that he was going to hold a press conference, and that he held it basically across the studio, across the hall, or very close by, and a WEGL alum named Don Mosley was going to host the press conference, and I think it was a pretty crowded room, and so he introduces Ali, but before that all happens, Ali's handlers tell him, look, he has, 30 minutes, I think, 30 minutes to answer questions. It is a hard out after that, and so then what happens? I hope we can pull up those photos.
Well, Don, being the consummate newsman and facilitator that he was going to stick to the 30 minutes, and so he says, I'll take one more question. And Ali comes over and picks him up by the lapels and walks him over to the corner of the stage and said, son, I'll be done when I'm done. And and then he whispered, I'm just kidding. And Don just loved it. And Don, it's great to hear Don tell that story today.
Yeah, Don said he was fearing for his life momentarily, and then as Ali got him out of the wings, he was going like, you okay? This is sort of one of those Ali shows, and then Ali took on more took more questions after that. I think that's just a really funny story. And then second to that, I know another one that I think is even, I don't know if it's better than that story because that's hard to beat, but it's darn close. And I want to say before we cue this up that I think the assumption is that the early DJs particularly were sort of mavericks, and you guys were like trying to push the envelope. But you've told me that it was basically the opposite. You thought you guys had a great thing and wanted to keep it going, so you were going to play by the rules if you needed to.
Right, we weren't trying to test the edges too much. I mean, some of the music tested the edges. The fact that we played Jimi Hendrix National Anthem, that tested the edges. But you're right, some of the other events, especially when we had outside people come on campus and they were interviewed by our news team, they had some interesting comments and interesting effects on campus.
Well, Rob Rainey, one of the early DJs here, I guess got a chance to interview the feminist and author Gloria Steinem, and I think we've got a video of him telling the story of what happens next. Gloria was not in agreement with apparently the rules for co-eds that existed at Auburn at the time, and she voiced that. So hopefully we can pull that up and hear that now.
In the live interview that we did, I mean, it's hard to believe now, but Auburn had an earlier curfew for women than they did for men, and women were not allowed to wear slacks. And Gloria thought this was just unbelievable. I mean, she said, I can't get over this. I just can't believe this. And she said, I think if I was a young woman and I was attending Auburn, that I wouldn't do it. I'd sleep outside before I would obey a curfew that was, before the men's curfew. I just can't believe that they're enforcing this. This is stupid. And I got a call from President Philpott at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and he said, Rob, did you encourage the women in the dorms to sleep out in the quad? And I said, no. He said, well, apparently Ms. Steinem suggested that, and we have a lot of women that are sleeping out on the quad right now. Do you think you might go to the radio station and discourage that? I went back to the station and said, if you're sleeping out in the quad, it would really be a good idea if you went back inside, because there are security issues and everybody's very concerned, and this is probably not the best idea.
All right, so that was Rob telling that fantastic story about Gloria Steinem. I know, I'm sure the administration wasn't real pleased by that, but that's one of those moments where you bump up against the culture. You can't help it as a radio station. You're putting the opinions out there and interviewing the people of the time. So those things occasionally happen. Bret, I think I want to move to you, as I want to talk about the role of station manager. So tell us what a station manager does, how long you've been in that role, and kind of what you see the role of station manager being.
Yeah, so to clarify, I'm the program advisor. Breland is
I'm sorry.
Is the station manager. You want to start with Breland first?
Sure, let's start with Breland since I totally flubbed the two titles, of course. So yeah, Breland, I know you're outgoing station manager. Let's talk about. A lot of people transition from DJs into leadership roles. So let's talk about your journey there, and how is that different from just being a DJ at the station?
So I began as a DJ my freshman first semester and loved being on the air. However, I don't think I was meant to be on the air, clearly. And so I applied to be the assistant program director, later serving as the program director my junior year. The program director is in charge of inputting people's playlists, making sure that the rotations for every genre continue to play, the automation system, and then I served as station manager my senior year. Station manager is in charge of overseeing all of the operations and making sure that everything runs smoothly. All of the members in WEGL are doing what they're supposed to do, as well as leading a staff, which I've loved getting to do, working not only with the DJs, but leading a 10-plus staff of a lot of great people.
And I think that's probably something that people don't appreciate enough of, is the leadership that you get when you're put in those roles to inspire other students and to lead them. So I imagine you've learned a lot along the way.
Yes, I've learned a lot about delegating. I know giving responsibilities and trusting that people will follow through with them. I've learned a lot about that as station manager, also in these leadership positions in WEGL.
Are there any particular partnerships that are happening now that you helped create that you're particularly proud of?
Yes, so that was one of my goals, being station manager, was collaborating with other organizations on campus. So this year we've had the honor to work with UPC in forming a concert, which we had a few months ago, Concert on Cater. We also paired with the Black Student Union for February. It was our first special to do honoring Black History Month, in which we played 1 hour every day, Black musicians and artists throughout the decades. And every Tuesday we brought in BSU members to engage in conversations and talk about that special month. We've also paired with the Eagles program. We have our wonderful DJ, Bradley Baisden, who has been doing a show for about 2 years now. Bret has worked a lot with him. But yes, we've loved collaborating with other organizations on campus.
Yeah, those are some really, really great programs and have really expanded, I think, the reach of the station. In the few minutes that we have left, Bret, let's talk about your role a little bit. I'm sorry that I Sorry that I misstated it earlier, but let's talk about your role as advisor to the station.
Yeah, so the advisor, it wears many different hats. First and foremost, I am the professional here at this station that's here to oversee the students and give them guidance on what direction to go. I want to be clear, my role is to not make programming decisions. I'm here to help them make programming decisions based off my expertise and expertise from professionals within the industry in bringing them in and setting them up to succeed. The students make all the programming decisions. When I say we're 100% student run, it's not that we don't have a full-time advising staff here, because we do, myself and Billy Ferris, but the students are the ones who are inputting the music. They're managing the clocks. They're making sure the station is up and running 24 hours a day. But in regards to my specific role, I'm kind of their accountant. I balance their budget for them. I'm their representation to administration here on campus, along with the station manager. I'm here as an engineer. If they need me to be an engineer, I'm here for marketing. I'm here to wear whatever hat they need me to be. And that's been a unique role, is not only along with the students. I've been learning in all the aspects of this job, of what this job entails, and I learn something new every day.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks. I definitely want to hear a couple of things. One is that the studio has been recently renamed, Bret, so can you speak to that and how that came about?
Yeah, Brulin, she just alluded to the partnership with the Eagles program in Bradley based. And for those that don't know, the Eagles program is an organization on campus that provides students with disabilities the opportunity to come and get a normal college experience, and also to teach them independence and to prepare them for the real world, so hopefully that they can live independently one day, and most importantly, get a degree from Auburn University, right? I mean, they deserve that opportunity, just as we've all been privileged to achieve. So, with the Eagles program in Bradley Bays, and they came to us 2 years ago, and they said they had this student that was very interested in radio, loved rock and roll music, loved classic rock, and he just wanted to find a place to get involved on campus. And Bradley, his speech is limited, but his passion for radio is there. And through this program, we come in and we just started teaching him day by day, week by week, as to what it took to be a DJ here at WEGL. And obviously his experience was a little catered to his needs. Obviously, him not being able to have a speaking part in his radio show.
Sure.
We decided to teach him the back end of what the staff is doing, and Breland's job as a program director at the time, and showing him how our system works, how to operate this software. Because at the time we were thinking, I didn't want him to just come in and push buttons on the board. He wasn't going to get a whole lot from that. I wanted him to get more of an understanding as to how we operate, how we work. And it's funny, Bradley, I think he knows our system better than probably 90% of our DJs due to the access that we've given him, and he's excelled. So with that, his parents, long story short, were just very thankful of WEGL and the opportunity that Bradley's been provided here, and they were very gracious in making a donation on Bradley's behalf to have the studio named after Bradley. So we are currently sitting in the Bradley-based in studio at WEGL 91.1 FM. And for Bradley, his parents, they made that donation to Student Affairs, and Dr. Bobby Woodard was very kind enough to give that money to WEGL so that we could purchase a new Axia audio console that has completely changed the capabilities of our studio.
Yeah, that's really great. But I want to do a couple of things. I want to bring Eddie in a second. Hopefully he can read out any shout-outs or questions that we have. But I want to make sure we don't get out of here completely until we hear a little bit about the 50th anniversary celebration that's going on all of this week, really, and kind of has been happening in some. And I know all three of you have been involved in the planning. Actually, I'll tell you what. If Eddie's ready, I'm going to bring him in and see what some comments and questions that we have. But I want to make sure we do not get out without promoting the 50th anniversary that's going on all this week. So Eddie, come on in.
Wonderful. There's a lot of comments out there, and I'll share several of these. Brian Wilson says, the same board we had in the late 80s. Alan White says, we had 10,000 milliwatt transmitter. Lee Woodward says, I thought the original Haley Center space was for TV or film. We have a lighting grid on the ceiling of what was the lobby area. So there's a lot of great comments. There's a lot of love for this show.
Very good. Are there any specific questions that these three can answer?
None at this moment, just a lot of good comments.
Oh, very good. Great. Well, I want to also talk about the 50th. So if anybody want to give a quick rundown on what's going on for the 50th?
So for the 50th, we are hosting a 24-hour live stream to honor 50 years being on air. We are kicking it off tonight. Dave and I are starting at 6 p.m., and then we're going to go through that for 24 hours. We've got all kinds of shows lined up. We've got old re-airs. We've got live music being played, interviews. We've got things all across the board. And then we'll be re-airing that on Sunday, which is the official 50th birthday of WEGL.
And I want to clarify, we're not airing it live on Sunday because that is the final day before finals that students can study. So unfortunately, we could not air it live that day, but we're very thankful to partner with our WEGL alumni such as Dave to come back and participate in this and give us so many great ideas. But also one thing we're doing leading up to it is we have a live concert on the green space tonight. It's beginning at 5 o'clock. It's
That's right.
going to be some local music acts that our live events coordinator, Dylan Baisden, who's been incredible this year, has helped us coordinate. So that's kicking off tonight at 5 for Auburn students to come and join. And I'm going to let Dave talk about this next thing. We kicked off a WEGL roll call leading up to the WEGL 50th to bring all the alumni together since we could not celebrate in person this spring for the 50th due to the pandemic. So,
Okay.
Dave, I'm going to let you talk about the roll call.
Quickly, if you could, Dave.
Okay, it was a replacement, if you will, for an in-person event that we had hoped to host last week on campus. We couldn't do it, but the Zoom technology has taken off in the last year, so we're taking advantage of that. And we've got a lot of alumni that are participating in these, and we've got one this afternoon.
And Dave, you're also president of the WEGL affiliate group, and so if people want to get in touch with that and join that affiliate group, if they're an ex-DJ that's listening to this, how do they get more involved?
2 ways. Get in touch with us on our Facebook, WEGL Alumni, and also our email address, wegl.alumni@gmail.com.
And I also want to do a shout out to the Aubie link, aub.ie/WEGL is 50. That's got the article and a lot of the audio visual that we've been talking about here today, as well as WEGLFM.com, which is for the radio station where you can find everything for them. First of all, I want to thank all three of you for being here. It's been a really great show. I know we're a little bit over, but it's an important and fun topic, and I'm really glad y'all were here today. I'm going to turn it back over to Eddie to get us out of here. Eddie, take us out of here.
Todd, Dave, Bret, and Breland, thank you for being our guests today. The Auburn Alumni Association is proud of the work that WEGL has been doing over the years. We are better because of your hard work, your passion, and dedication. Tune in May 13th for the second part of our council, Young Alumni Council discussion. Until then, stay safe and War Eagle.
91.1 WEGL FM, Auburn University.